So this, by the way, is a long time coming for me. I've worked, for those of you who don't know me, I worked in in technical account management, pre-sales for New Relic for a year and a half, 2 years, and was selling that entire time to GE and working with Keagan. And so Keagan learned APM from the ground up with us and got to see this obviously turn into a big deal with them, but also to see him kind of blossom and own that whole account and this entire rollout. So it's a pretty impressive story we're going to tell, and I'm excited for you guys to hear it. So, Keagan, everybody knows GE is this huge company. They do all kinds of stuff, jet engines all the way down to refrigerators. Mm-hmm. So where do you fit into that? What do you work on?
So I'm with the GE Digital business, which formerly was corporate IT, and basically what I do is lead a whole team of folks that kind of set the standards for application monitoring across the company. And we do things from basically take business requirements and technical requirements for what our end users need to see and translate that into solutions to deploy. So it's a lot with enhancing the solution and kind of putting all the data together for all the business units out there so that they can consume sort of a common platform and that sort of thing.
So like day-to-day, what does that look like for you though?
So day-to-day, it's like basically deploying, implementing, configuring, or tweaking any of the different New Relic products that folks choose to use based on their end user requirements out there. It might be helping somebody implement browser or configuring an APM agent to pull in like custom JMX metric or something like that. And really just keeping the lights on and training folks on how best to use the product to their full capabilities.
A lot of training? Do you find yourself doing
No, I mean the New Relic suite of tools, I mean the beauty of it, it pretty much speaks for itself, so it kind of had the trickle effect in terms of adoption within GE to where folks just start talking like, oh, hey, I deployed APM. Well, what does that do? And then they just start talking, and then it trickles down from there in terms of deployment. So
makes your life easy. Made my life easy too.
It does. It does.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about where we started with the legacy monitoring situation, and talk about how we've evolved there. So I guess just start. How was monitoring dealt with? I guess when you were tasked with monitoring.
So I took over the service.
And where was the, go ahead.
Yeah. I took over the service probably a year and a half ago, and the only type of application monitoring was really in the hands of synthetic and infrastructure tools. So folks had that mindset or that thought process where the only way I can measure end user experience is by deploying robots at every single site where my users sit. So that really led to a lot of issues on my team's end because we had to manage and maintain all that infrastructure. And I think we had like 500 plus robots out there at every single one-off GE site and that sort of thing. So pretty much where every single user sat within the company. So
how did you get from there to here when you have people that are used to 500 robots running on personal computers?
Right. So yeah, that was a huge challenge. So it's really hard to train an old dog to do new tricks because it was ingrained in the GE culture for so long that monitoring was only in the hands of those emulated scripts that ran from different locations around the globe, really to capture response time and performance and availability stats and that sort of thing. And so enough was enough. I mean, is where GE is headed as a leading software company, it really was time to match like the development work that a lot of folks are doing and DevOps methodologies with monitoring to kind of align everything and push it forward from there.
So it's funny, where the next question that kind of is a perfect lead into it, we were talking about how in modernizing the approach, you're also modernizing how the teams operate. DevOps, the word everyone loves to throw out, but it's something that you're actually applying to these people, like not just using words. So what exactly is that? How does it?
So DevOps in GE is definitely becoming increasingly more important. We're actually driving our application teams to have that more full control over the life cycle of software development and application deployment. So it's moving away from these developers write the code and then give it to the sysadmins to configure the environments to run the code and that sort of thing. It's really becoming integrated to our application teams just owning the whole process and being more self-service and automated. So it kind of brings everybody together to be more collaborative.
I'm guessing that would be kind of tough to pull that off with some of these groups.
Oh, it is. It's still ongoing, definitely. But I mean, it's really just breaking down the barriers between business units that were traditionally siloed within GE. Like for example, oil and gas might have had specific rules and regulations and thought they had special requirements based on what data and what products they were producing compared to like power and water or energy management and that sort of thing. When in reality, when you talk about monitoring across all those businesses, they really were reinventing the wheel when they were solving the same kind of problems, just kind of in their own siloed environments. So it's really breaking down that collaboration across those businesses and bringing them together on a common platform to kind of reuse and reshare ideas when deploying monitoring. So,
good. Yeah, absolutely. So how much coverage has? I mean, I know we talked about synthetics here. So how much of the new Relic suite are you guys using heavily at this point?
So everything is really, really heavily used, especially in the APM and synthetic space. Folks still really want that synthetic performance and availability that they're used to. So the only thing that I don't think a lot of folks are using are mobile as of right now, just because our mobile teams are such in like a develop and push out code and that kind of mindset. They don't have time to think about like crash reporting and user interactions with their applications.
God forbid. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it'll get there eventually, but yeah.
Cool. And I mean, I know it's going to run the gamut with these business units and individual groups in them, but how is New Relic being used to the way you expect? Like, how are these teams using it on a daily basis? Does it seem consistent?
A lot of the teams are just using it sort of just with its out-of-box functionalities. Since GE has such a high customization of technologies out there, I mean, we use pretty much everything from Java to Node to Ruby to Go now, and that sort of thing. It's really just like defining what the requirements are and then us providing best practices on what tools to deploy based on those requirements, because a lot of folks in GE don't want to be an expert on the tool. They just want to see the data output of what they're trying to accomplish from a business goal requirement or technical from an operations and that sort of thing.
So you've had to do some pretty interesting things to accommodate them.
Yeah.
Like some interesting
highly customized environments means highly customized solutions usually. So
yeah, that's right. Let me see. Well, got through a lot of what I wanted to talk about. When I know the big thing with the business units, we dealt with working with some were really easy and some were really difficult. How is the approach, coming to them with this modern approach of DevOps and the simplicity of New Relic? How has that enabled you to get through to these teams, to some of them?
So, I mean, it really starts to drive down from leadership. I mean, like coming from my level, I can't mandate teams to use different platforms or different like CI/CD solutions and that sort of thing. So it really was driven from the top down from leadership. And it's really, like I said before, New Relic kind of speaks for itself with its product base. So people are just like, oh, this is really easy to deploy. I can throw this into like my CI/CD process or bake this into my application deploy and that sort of thing. So.
CI/CD is something I actually want to talk about too. But before that, can you give us an idea, and if you can't throw numbers out, it's okay, how big we're talking about, the number of accounts or sub-accounts, number of apps, like.
So you mean like total across GE?
Sure.
So we probably have close to, I'd say 200 accounts, and don't quote me on that, but.
That's okay.
And then from a deployment perspective, we actually probably have 20,000 server agents deployed and probably like close to 5,000 APM.
Wow.
So yeah, it's been widely adopted, especially in the past 8 months. I mean, we've grown from just in the hundreds to thousands of everything in terms of deployment.
So that, and you've done a really good job. And one of those things, and this is the CI/CD part, is how do you roll out to that many servers? How do you roll out to that many apps and get it right?
Automation is a huge, huge part of monitoring nowadays. I mean, since everything is so lightweight and you can just lift and shift solutions pretty much with the tools that are out there. We use tools like Chef and Ansible to handle a lot of the deployments into AWS and even onto our on-prem environments, into our own data center still. And it really just comes down to requirements and what we're allowed to put on servers based on like their criticality or what data sits on them in terms of like connecting via like an SSH key in Ansible or that sort of thing. So.
along similar lines, and it more has to do with the modernization that GE has gone through, where now obviously they're comfortable with a SaaS solution. We are completely ubiquitous across the company. What other, I guess, challenges have been out there, and maybe I don't know how we've been involved necessarily around moving to the cloud? You know, GE, what initiatives are they going after?
So yeah, that's a huge initiative in GE right now, is we're trying to move as many apps to the cloud as possible, just because GE is getting out of the space of managing infrastructure and the whole patching process and maintaining data centers. So we really want to shift the focus to developers and enable folks to be more software minded and that sort of thing, to produce software rather than focus on maintaining infrastructure and that sort of thing.
Right.
So obviously with the Predictive platform, there's containerized environments and microservices running amok right now. So.
And New Relic trying to monitor them.
Yep.
That's right.
Yeah, with the new infrastructure platform. So.
Amen.
Yeah.
So I guess to wrap up at least our thoughts, you know, we're going to open this up to questions. I figure I would like to hear what you guys would like to know from us about the experience. But what kind of guidance can you give to people that are dealing with a big organization like this, with business units and different teams to accommodate and at scale
So
too?
I think for larger organizations, especially like GE, like the monolith that it is, it's really important to drive collaboration and try to get business units out of that siloed kind of, I always do it this way versus Powerwire doing it just a little bit different and that sort of thing, compared to like a business like aviation or energy, when really it should just be a common platform that they can use across all of their solutions that they're trying to deploy and their business goals to meet and that sort of thing. So, and I'd also say you'd want to really nail down what data you want to see and kind of correlate together. I mean, especially with insights. That way you can really not go after like, just give me all the data, when that's kind of like a lazy answer. You really want to focus on what makes sense to correlate together, so that way you can kind of, have different kind of rolled views for different folks that do different things on teams.
Just off the cuff, have you used anything new, like the new alerting stuff, the new dashboards, to accommodate some of those requirements?
So with any implementation for any of our end users that we initially deploy, we always have pre-built standard insights dashboards that we also put out with those implementations. So for example, like an executive might only care about, I want to see how many unique users are logging into my application, and how is this suite of apps that I manage performing on like a daily or monthly basis, whereas an operations rolled view might be, show me how many times this error occurred with this like matching text in a log or something like that, sort of like log analytics. So we kind of built those best practice and standardized dashboards for a lot of the different roles across GE.
Cool.
So.
And one more. No. Kind of along the lines with the CI/CD thing too, something that you guys I think have relied on, so I'm asking, is use of our API to take care of automating things and getting data and customizing. So I don't know if you have any examples you could talk about or anything.
Yeah, we're heavy users of the New Relic API. We actually just broke the synthetics API last week because we were using it to do scheduled downtimes of synthetic checks. Just because they just released that maintenance Windows functionality in synthetics that we desperately needed. Because a lot of folks within GE want their monitors from a synthetic perspective to run on specific time intervals rather than just 24/7 and that sort of thing. But in terms of other things like reporting, we actually have like custom API reports that we pull to really allow folks to pull down, similar to like the Monday weekly metrics reporting that New Relic automatically sends, but we can specify what apps and what accounts really go into that and output that.
And I'll just a sidebar, I can't tell you how many times that I did receive that request from any random business unit. So-and-so in healthcare is like, can I customize these reports? I'm like, no, this is kind of it. So it's good to hear that you worked around that, found a creative way around that. That's good.
Yeah, and in terms of other types of automation we've done using the API, we actually have a pretty cool automation where we like bake in custom Python scripts that call the API with some of our Ansible playbooks to kind of automate an entire workflow or process from deploying an agent to automatically setting up the alert policies and assigning entities. So it's a push of a button and it does all that for you in one flow.
Nice.
So.
Cool. That's all I wanted to ask. I mean, if you have any closing thoughts you want to mention before, but other than that, we want to open this up to hear from you guys what you'd like to know from us. Obviously, bear in mind, we have some non-disclosure that we have to follow. So we'll see if we can answer your question, but just respect if we can't. Mm-hmm. Anybody? Got a few? That's good.
From your experience, would you say that the new Relic suite offers the ability to replace existing log and event management systems? Or is it something more specific just to the performance?
You said log?
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, this guy right here.
Logging and event management.
So from a logging perspective, this guy wrote a plugin that's actually like a poor man's Splunk. So it uses like open source Logstash. So I mean, you could use that. I mean, obviously there's a lot of maintenance behind using Logstash compared to other tools. But I would say they're definitely, with their alerting system, the way it's headed, it's definitely gives more impact for like event management and that sort of thing. And I think it's driving more towards that like manager of managers, where you can correlate a lot of the data for operations teams that they consume, like ServiceNow tickets and incidents and changes, to the actual event that caused that to trigger and that sort of thing. So.
You said earlier that you had about 5,000 APM installs.
Mm-hmm.
You said earlier that you had about 5,000 APM installs. How does that break down? Is that like unique application identifiers, like in the New Relic dashboard?
So it's a mix between many different environments. A lot of it is in AWS, and then a lot of agents are also deployed on our legacy data center environments. So it's really just a mix between different business units, since we kind of manage it all across the company for a lot of businesses. So we kind of have it filtered out by on a per account basis, where oil and gas has their set of master and subs versus power and water has their own implementation. But from my team's perspective, we have the whole overall picture, so we can kind of track and point people in the right direction based on previous implementations that we've seen. So.
Okay, follow up. So how many like applications would you say you have for your production?
I'd say from a managed perspective, we probably are monitoring about 1,500 to 2,000 right now. So.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone here? Victor? Sure.
So we're just getting to the point where we're starting to launch off our DevOps initiative. And how big of an impact did New Relic play into the integration of your development and your operations teams? And what are some things that you wish you knew when you started using it and implementing it there?
So in terms of what I wish we would have started using a lot earlier, would be probably the browser and insights modules. I mean, Insights is a really powerful tool where we can pull in events from even other systems and kind of create that single pane of glass view for a lot of people. And then from a browser perspective, like I mentioned, Synthetics was always that tool to really capture end user experience for most folks in GE. So I mean, that's huge, where you're actually getting real throughput for end users as they hit your application. So that would probably be the big two I'd recommend, or I wish that we started using a long time ago. So.
So you mentioned you're monitoring about 1,500 to 2,000 apps at the moment. That's quite a large span of control. How do you coordinate, like, over time, do you find that the tuning gets better? Because you're monitoring at scale right now, right? So how do you handle all those alerts that come up, and over time, has that picture got better for your team?
So from a managerial standpoint, I would say it's definitely been easier with New Relic to kind of see the big picture of things. I mean, we have customized dashboards that we created in Insights, where we can actually see across all master and sub accounts, like all 200, that we can actually see how many APM agents are deployed, and if that number goes up, and then we can actually see what was deployed. So it's easy to keep track of that with just some simple calls to the New Relic API and creating some Insights dashboards. So.
Anybody else? No? Okay. They were riveted.
Yeah.
All right.
Of everything that Lou announced at the keynote, what are you looking forward to the most?
Project Seymour with predictive analytics. Desperately need that. So
Something you've asked for 2
Yes.
years.
yeah.
2 long years. No, we're excited to see it too, and just the enterprise. Just so you guys know, I work with a lot of enterprise customers, and when you have that big of an account, you have thousands of servers you need to manage, or hosts, or apps, or whatever it is. You need you hope to have some sort of intelligence behind the scenes to take care of it for you. You can only go so far. I mean, you can say, tell us how, in a typical day, how busy are you with New Relic, like tied up in either configuration of it or actually using it for, debugging a problem?
It's a fair amount of time because folks will come to us to help them fix their issues. So we'll get pulled in, even though we're more of a higher level, at a functional level, just to deploy and then have our end users consume the data, like operations team, developers, managers, et cetera. We still get pulled into like incidents to help them resolve and troubleshoot faster, just because we're in the tool every day and we see how to drill into things and that sort of thing. So, like I said, people don't want to be experts on the tool; they just want to know where the data is that they need to see.
Right.
So.
And so you're definitely going to be a benefactor of Seymour, because you have to do all that, and some people will start to get that for themselves. And
Yeah. Well, the plan with that is I really want to use that sort of functionality with predictive analytics to drive business units to really understand what normal response time is for their application more, rather than just kind of guessing. Because a lot of folks, it's not mandated to do any kind of load testing anymore. So.
why would you do that?
Right.
Cool.
Cool. Well, if anybody has any other questions, just come out to me and here all week. So.
Keagan, could you just share with the audience some specific use cases where GE recognized immediate value by using some of our products? Because I know you have a couple there.
So, there's a bunch of specific ones I can think of on the top of my head when we were first adopting New Relic. So we have an internal file management system called libraries.ge.com. And traditionally, they were only using like infrastructure tools and synthetics, like I mentioned, to really monitor their application. And this is an app that's mission critical, used for the file system for all of GE, for folks to kind of reuse and share different files. And there was tons of issues where it just kept going down and down, and we installed New Relic instantly, and it really just pinpointed to there was a database overload. So I know you were involved in that too.
I was involved in that. I remember it well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh-oh.
Hey, Keagan, so you were saying that you are using your synthetics and you're actually pulling data metrics out of that. What data points are you pulling out?
From synthetics, you said? So a lot of it is performance and availability, and then folks want to see on a per-step basis what the response time is. So, for example, a script might just go and log in with a functional ID and password to an application, hit a few pages, and then log out. So on that, each step, they want to know the response time and how many times that particular step failed over like a given week or month. And we have custom insights dashboards, since they have the synthetic attributes and insights, to really deploy that as well alongside a new synthetic check. So.
Yeah, he built some of the dashboards that you need.
Yep.
So you're pulling out object level data points?
Yeah.
So you can see, if you have any new third parties on your site or new advertising, things like that?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And
Yeah, I can show you after this if you want. That's fine.
Right on. Thanks. So, are you by any chance using New Relic for monitoring the performance of your continuous integration, or is it just all on the customer-facing application side? Do you use it for any kind of, administrative monitoring and performance?
Can you go a little bit more?
So, for example, if you're using Jenkins, which I don't know if you are, and there's a build pipeline, and there's certain pieces that are, performing better or poorer, those would be metrics that I'd be interested in seeing, pulling into a single pane of glass, like you said, so I can see
Yeah,
from the beginning to the end?
We do that a little bit. I don't think we do it to the level that you're probably looking for, though. We try to really bake monitoring into the CID whole pipeline and process from like just deploy monitoring on this new app that's going through that process and that sort of thing. So it might be like a new app is getting migrated into AWS that's currently on-prem in our data centers. And so the build team just really constructs like the chef cookbooks to include all the monitoring and then bake in our custom scripts that we have via the API to set up like the alerting and all the other manual stuff. So.
Hey, Keagan. Quick question. So you were talking about DevOps, and in Lou's keynote, he talked about a lot of the different personas that are involved in getting benefit out of New Relic data. Just what are some of your thoughts on other overlap or kind of combinations of the different personas to add efficiencies in GE, and how does having access to data that you get out of the New Relic platform facilitate some of that?
So, like I mentioned, it's nice because if all of the business units, or most of them anyway, are using that common shared platform, then they can really just reference, like as self-service, what other folks are doing so that they can kind of reuse instead of reinventing the wheel. So, yep, exactly.
Could you give me an idea, if you think back early on, of how you got your development team sort of energized and excited to start using New Relic to monitor some of?
So that was easy because the legacy stuff we had was horrible from a managerial standpoint. Like I mentioned, we were maintaining 500 plus robots that ran synthetic checks out there. So it was really easy to get them excited to where we can get out of the business of maintaining infrastructure and move to more of a mindset of enhancing the overall solution across GE. So.
And last question for me, at least.
Right.
What are what are some of your thoughts? I know that you've had a chance to look at New Relic infrastructure. Can you share some of your thoughts on what you see out of the value of New Relic, or what have some of your initial impressions been?
So we've done a little bit of testing with it in a lot of our AWS environments, and I love the idea of being able to pull back like the tagging to be able to easily filter by different attributes and that sort of thing, especially with the metadata in AWS. And then I know it's pretty much built for like containerized and microservice environments, so I think it'll be a huge benefit for like our Predictive platform as well. So. Mm-hmm.
So Keagan, you mentioned Predictive twice. I'm not sure the audience knows what Predictive is. Could you just give a little bit of background of what GE is doing from a Predictive perspective and how our products have helped that platform a bit?
Yeah, so the Predictive platform is really its own like cloud foundry environment that a lot of folks can develop like industrial internet applications in. So GE went ahead and not only made their own new market, they actually decided to make a new platform to lead that market. So it's really new. I mean, there's a lot of exciting things going on, from like digitizing a lot of the machine data and correlating that in together to kind of make our brilliant factories out there more efficient and that sort of thing. And it's really the driver behind a lot of where GE is going as a software company. So.
Hi. Early on, you mentioned that you have a lot of bots. I've heard in some other presentation you guys have things like optionality bots and optimizations and stuff like that. If you were to think about the interaction between the AWS that you use as a platform and the New Relic you use for monitoring and performance management and insights, I mean, what would be the top features? Because you mentioned CMOS is something that you'd like to see come out and your team's very excited. What other innovations do you think is missing right now that you really like to see AWS and New Relic kind of invest in to make your lives better?
From an AWS perspective, or just overall New Relic?
The two of us combined, AWS, New Relic.
That's a multifaceted question. So from an AWS perspective, obviously, like the infrastructure product is going to be huge. So when things like auto scaling occur, and you're scaling up and down instances like at will based on like customer usage or folks hitting an application. That's going to be pretty huge to where you don't have to automatically invoke like a chef script or something like that every time you need to go through auto scaling to redeploy on those new instances spun up. From an overall New Relic standpoint, I'd say since we're really heavy users of APM synthetics and currently servers, but soon infrastructure, we really need to nail down, I think, pulling all that data more together efficiently, I would say, just because it's so widespread across all the business units right now. It's breaking down those barriers, like I said, and driving collaboration so that folks in oil and gas that have applications that interact with other businesses like power and water can really see the whole flow of how their applications are going. And I think that's coming up with the new service maps too. I heard that there's some pretty cool stuff going up with that. So
Expanding how far it can reach.
yeah, like the service map kind of view that they have today, if we had that across multiple master and sub accounts, so you can see the whole picture and that sort of thing. Because like today, like our SSO or authentication team has all of their policy servers in one account, and those obviously do the authentication for a lot of our applications out there. So being able to see that full view between multiple accounts, sort of in a UI format, would be nice too. So.
So you've told us the story of how GE has scaled to having a huge number of New Relic instances and agents running. What was the process going from 0 to say 100? I imagine that was an incredibly difficult process. What were some of the difficulties and how did you overcome them?
I want to hear your take on this one. I'll give my version.
So do you mean like migrating to New Relic off our legacy stuff?
Not in a technical aspect, in a business aspect. How did you get the buy-in? What was
The
some
initial
of the
proof of concept, the first 100, how did we get from 0 to 100?
Okay. Yeah, so basically, from our perspective, we did a lot of heavy lifting and like POC work on my team's end to really just vet out the products and prove them out for folks. And then obviously it's just a matter of demoing it, because I mean, I mentioned this to you before. The product pretty much speaks for itself once it's out there and doing its thing. So.
Yeah, going back to when GE joined us as a customer, which I don't know if I could say when, but it's been a long time, they were self-service. They bought X amount to monitor PHP and some Node and things like that. And that's when we actually found out that they were a customer and that they were not the GE that we pictured they would be. They were advanced. They were thinking ahead. They were using Node. I was like, wow, you know what JavaScript is? That's awesome. But and this is in buttoned-up Connecticut. It was the first time I encountered him in Shelton, Connecticut. And it's kind of grown organically from there. And that's my perspective, is that first 100, first 200, it was a perfect storm going on where you had business units communicating that never did before. They operated as silos. Some of it was for mandate, and some of it was just a common need. We need monitoring. We need better app monitoring. We have this old legacy stuff that's costing us a fortune, right? So groups would come to us. They would get wind of Keagan's name and his boss's name, and send them emails, and then he'd send me an email, and we'd get on a go-to meeting and install an agent. And it was never hard. I mean, sometimes it was complicated, difficult problems, but it was never. It was never impossible things. It was just the continuous fostering of this organic growth. And so by the time that the big purchase, I obviously can't get into specifics, but it was obvious at that point that there was enough of a demand across all these business units, because they had this much more to go on, and they've all POC'd and they all liked it. We're an endearing company. They liked working with us. And
I think it was helpful too, where we actually had a lot of our mission critical apps on the platform before others. So people are like, oh, if this can go on there, then I can really use that for my application as well. So.
And some of those early wins did play into it too.
Yeah.
That one was a good one where we did find problems quickly, and real problems in well-used applications at a number of business units. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just overall too, with the New Relic product suite adoption, our operations teams, like mean time to resolution, just improved significantly, because with the old synthetic solution we had, all those robots were actually deployed on client machines. So the software is installed on like a Windows 7 machine that might be sitting under somebody's desk at a specific site. So obviously that's not the ideal way to manage. Yeah, it's not the ideal way to manage and maintain, and it's a pain for my team to manage because if we couldn't remote in because Windows did like automatic updates or something like that, we have to reach out to like an on-site contact to really get that machine up and running. And while that's going on, that's obviously a loss for monitoring production applications. So
It actually reminded me of something to ask that we haven't talked about with synthetics is the private minion, which also a little story. I visited him in Detroit. That's where he's outside of Detroit, and I'm on the East Coast in Baltimore. And we deployed private minions when they were still kind of choosing the name, and are we going to call it minions? And it was very early alpha, but we were just proving out that we could do it because in order for the synthetics for them to buy it, they needed that capability, the bots, and eventually it did get to a usable state. So how big of a deployment has that been, and how hard has that been to manage? Because I know it's got to be something.
So the solution for synthetics that we have from a private minion perspective, instead of targeting every single G site like traditional synthetics that we had, we just cut that out completely, and there was a lot of pushback on that, but that's not the way to monitor end user experience. Synthetics is there for performance and availability and to constantly check your application, like when there's no throughput or something like that on it. So it was really a challenge to drive people away from that mentality that's been ingrained in G for so long. I need a robot at this location, and we even had robots deployed in like Africa to monitor application end users from there. So yeah, it was a huge challenge, but definitely we only deployed New Relic minions compared to how we used to do it in only strategic like data center locations. So it's really more focused on regional performance rather than site specific, that sort of thing.
So like economy of scale, 10, 100, 1,000?
We probably have like close to 30 deployed right now because they scale horizontally. So we just add more from that location, yeah, when the load goes up. So.
Right. Cool.
Hello? Oh, hey. I wanted to ask about training, especially in that beginning, that 0 to 100, first 100 instances. Like, how did you guys learn to get beyond that kind of out-of-the-box dashboard phase? Because that's where I feel like our company is in our New Relic journey is we've got it, and we definitely derive some value from New Relic, mostly from the out-of-the-box dashboards and application monitoring and things like that. How did you guys kind of get from there to where you're kind of creating these custom dashboards and using synthetics and finding the metrics that really matter to you?
So it's a lot based on our end user feedback on what they need to see. So if somebody comes to us with a requirement that says, I need to see this metric or this piece of data, we can kind of reuse that sort of implementation across more folks across the business units since we have visibility into everything. So it's really just writing down and really documenting what your end users need to see and just accommodating for that.
Okay.
Anything else? Cool.
All right. Thanks, everyone.